I am looking forward to being back here with you today to talk more about protein. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the importance of protein in the body, the function of protein in the body, the benefits of grass-fed protein, and I'm going to answer the questions: what are the building blocks of life? Is red meat inflammatory? And also, is quinoa a good source of protein? I'm also going to talk about the benefits or risks of protein powders. And are protein powders a good choice? And if so, or if not, what do we do? So I've got lots of information today about protein and about diet. But first, I want to start out with just a little bit of science. What is protein? Protein is one of the building blocks of life. And so cells are considered to be the building blocks of life. And we have four primary components that make up these cells. And protein is one of them. And glycan's another. And then we have our lipids. And finally, we have our nucleic acids, which include the RNA and DNA portion of our cell. And when we look at the function of what does protein do in the body, it's really responsible for so many factors, right? It's responsible for our tissue. It's responsible for bone, for muscle. So without good, high quality sources of protein, we are not going to have good, strong bones as we age. We are not going to have good, healthy muscles and tendons and cartilage to support those bones. And we're not going to have a lot of the chemical reactions that are responsible for everything that goes on inside of our body. So proteins are key to all the enzyme activity. So we've talked about metabolic health recently. When we talk about metabolic health, we are talking about enzyme reactions. We're talking about chemical reactions that are happening every second that you and I are breathing air. And so we have to be aware that the things that we're putting into our body, specifically protein that we're talking about today, is a key factor in how well those enzyme activities carry themselves out. One of the key things that I want to point out is that protein and the right source of protein has a lot of impact on the neurotransmitter activity that occurs inside of our brain, our nervous system. So a lot of us out there are experiencing the anxiety and the overwhelm and many of these mental health concerns. The source of this mental health disruption is in part our food, our fuel. We don't put the wrong type of fuel inside of our car and expect our car to go. So we can't put the wrong types of fuel inside of our body and expect our body to perform eloquently and beautifully. So today we want to just dive into that protein piece because I know you all have a lot of questions. And so let's start out and talk about the three key factors that are most important. Purity. So without pure sources of protein, which may be hard to find these days, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to perform those chemical reactions. And anything that we put into our body that our body doesn't recognize as being a key component for those enzyme activities is going to store in a fat cell. It's going to create and encapsulate itself inside of a fat cell because this is our body's way of keeping you safe. So when you pick up your food out there in the supermarket or out of the cupboard in your home, or you get it delivered by whomever these days, I want you to really look at those labels. And I want you to ask yourself the question, is this coming from whole food? Is this coming from a place in nature? Because that's an important question to ask. We eat a lot of fillers these days, a lot of things that are chemically derived and chemically made. And so we want to look at the purity. We also want to look at the completeness when it comes to a protein, because complete proteins are required to create that DNA and that RNA and to replicate those cells and to carry out these enzyme activities. Then we want to be thinking about how much variety can we get in an average day in our diet when it comes to not only fruits and vegetables, but especially protein. Did you know that we tend to eat the same 11 meals over and over again? Repeated studies have shown that when we go grocery shopping or when we create our meals, we create the same 11 items over and over again. I think over time we're repeating these meals, which means that we're repeating the types of vitamins and minerals and nutrients that we are putting into our body, which increases our risk of being deficient in certain nutrients and minerals and things that our body needs to carry out these enzymatic activities. And in the short term, we can recover because our bodies are really resilient, but in the long term, we can't because we accelerate our aging process. And that's where that MetaPower system comes in, which I talked about in a previous video. All right, I want to talk about digestibility, and that goes back to some of the natural aspects of your source of protein. Is it coming directly from nature? So digestibility is really important, and you've asked me before, what is the best protein for me? What is the ideal source of protein powder? And the ideal source is the source that you can digest the best. And I know some of you are doing the eye roll right now at me and saying that's not very helpful. But when we tune into how something makes us feel, it gives us information about our body and about our digestive system. When you eat things, slow down. Be conscious of your chewing and be conscious of how you feel while you're eating it and then after you're eating it. Why do we choose grass-fed protein? Why is that important? One of the resources that I used was Dr. Bernard Jensen's resource book that came out in 1983. I don't want you to think this information is dated. I wanted to show you that way back then, one of the key components that he was talking about is the amount of light that is captured in the food that we eat. Whether it's a plant like alfalfa or a microalgae, which I want to talk about later with you, or our animal protein sources. All of these things that we are eating and putting into our body, if we really get down to it, the thing that we're consuming is the light, the sunlight that was absorbed by these organisms that we are now eating. So I just want to remind you that Triscuits don't have any light. Grass-fed meat, grass-fed animal protein is far superior to any other protein because these animals were meant to graze on grass. They were meant to be free. They were meant to consume the minerals in this grass so that they could transfer those minerals onto the humans who are eating them or other organisms that are eating them. This is a key component that Dr. Jensen knew back then. And for those of you who don't know Dr. Bernard Jensen, he's the father of iridology, and I studied iridology for over a decade. The irises and the sclera tell us so much about ourselves and our health. But he was a smart man, and he knew how to help people recover from very debilitating illnesses. And he did this through high quality whey protein. Now, we can get whey protein from goat's milk as well, I know, but there are some high quality sources of mineral goat whey protein out there. So give that some consideration. Another way that you can get high quality mineral complex that you're looking for is through bone broth. Bone broth is what I saute all my vegetables in instead of an oil or a fat. It's what I cook any of my whole grains in instead of water. So this ups the mineral profile that you're going to bring into your body, which means better bones, stronger muscles, and better enzymic activity inside of your body to build and create and sustain life and energy. Now I want to dive into what are the best sources of protein. And again, I'm going back to Dr. Jensen because this is really tough to answer. What is the best source of protein? We all have our likes and dislikes. We all have digestive qualities that have us moving towards certain things and others. Some of us are vegetarian or vegan, and so we have to rethink things. And what I'm going to say to vegetarians and vegans is please choose variety. Don't give up the search for different foods that are going to bring different types of proteins into your body, because you really need that. Let's not get stuck in a rut. And if you are vegan or vegetarian, quinoa is a great staple to have in your diet, along with some of the microalgae. I mentioned microalgae earlier, and I want to return back to it for just a moment. One of the best microalgae that you can choose is spirulina. And the reason is because it helps with muscle recovery. And it's also a pretty comprehensive protein. 1 teaspoon of spirulina equals the same amount of protein that you would get from 1 ounce of beef. So spirulina is a really easy thing to add into those protein shakes you might be consuming, or to sprinkle on top of your salad, or to mix into soups or your stir fry. Chlorella is another one, but I'm going to caution you a little bit on chlorella just because of its huge detoxifying properties to the liver. And so you want to be using it a little more sparingly than your spirulina, because although it's a great source of protein, it is going to unlock that liver a little faster, and you may not want all those toxins floating around in the body without having a binder to them to make sure that they're getting out properly. And if that sounds like you, reach out to me so I can help you. All right, best sources of animal protein. Definitely poultry, lamb, fish with fins, which means they have scales and they're white meat, and they're caught in cold water. Colder the water, the better. We definitely don't want any farm-raised or vegetarian-fed food if we can help it, because vegetarian-fed food means that it's been fed chemically laden soy or corn. And a lot of times people think that they can't digest a particular protein, and the truth of the matter is that what they can't digest is the feed that was given to the animal. And this is common with chicken. Chicken is being given a lot of feed that has hormones in them, and that is laden with corn and soy, and then there's byproducts to those, because we know that there's glyphosate and Bt toxins that are genetically modified into the corn and the soy. A serving of beef or pork should fit in the palm of your hand. So everybody's palm is different, and it's based on your size. So you want to look at, is my protein fitting inside the palm of my hand, not including the fingers? And that's a lesson you're going to have to teach the guys in your household probably, because they like to go with the whole hand. And then your eggs and your milk and your cheese products, also good sources of protein. However, choose raw whenever possible. Anything that is pasteurized has been heated to such a temperature that it's killing the enzymes in there that are going to help you naturally digest that product. So if you can't get your hands on unpasteurized or raw sources of these foods, and you like them and you want to use them as protein sources, please include digestive enzymes every single time you consume them, because you need the enzymes to be able to break them down so that your body can then use the nutrients to create those enzymatic activities. All right, let's see. And just as a side note, from an iridology standpoint, blue-eyed people struggle to digest any dairy products whatsoever. So we want to eat them sparingly. Cheese that is aged and that crumbles easily is going to be a higher source of protein than cheese that is more on the soft side. Then eggs. I get questions about eggs all the time. Eggs, in truth, should be one of the top foods that we can consume. They should be packed full of nutrients. However, you have to know where your egg comes from, and you have to know what your chicken ate. So if you don't know those things, the egg should be eaten in moderation, because the egg is what the chicken eats. And so we want to be making sure that we understand this, because a lot of people eat eggs and they end up with a lot of allergy type symptoms, congestion, bloating, skin issues. That's a big one. And they don't realize that it's because of the egg that they're eating. Eggs are a whole food. They're great for us, but we want to be looking at our local farmers and encouraging them to feed these chickens free range like they should be. So that's what you want to be looking for. Free range, not necessarily organic. Really read your label. Try to stay away from vegetarian fed if at all possible. The eggs have lecithin in them, which balances out our cholesterol. So eggs and grass-fed beef do not contribute to elevated cholesterol when we are eating clean, pure sources of these foods. All right, now let's talk about seeds and nuts. Sesame seed, sunflower, alfalfa, and apricot seeds. These are your top seeds that you can consume with high amounts of protein. Sesame seeds, awesome form of protein and great source of calcium. So if bones are a concern to you, sesame seeds. Soak your own, grind your own if possible, or get small containers of tahini if you're going to consume this food, because it goes rancid very quickly and you don't absorb the nutrients. In this day and age, with all the fancy gadgets we have for the kitchen, it's pretty easy to make these nut butters. We should be investing just a few minutes to make these sources of food if we're relying on them as staples. When it comes to nuts, almond, Brazil nuts, pecans, black walnuts, macadamia nuts, these are going to be your top choices. And the reason for that is because they have hard shells. And the comparison that I'm going to make is to peanuts. Peanuts have a soft shell. They're also grown in the ground, which increases their mold spore count and makes them a far lesser choice to have than these nuts that I've mentioned. So when you're looking for a source of protein, nuts and seeds are a great source of protein because they nourish our eyes and our brain with the fat content that they bring in. And again, everything in balance creates optimal health, right? So sugar drives up inflammation, and inflammation creates poor elasticity in the vessels, which is the root contributor for cholesterol. Leads me to my last source of protein, which is beans and legumes and lentils and everything in that category. And so from everything that I researched, ultimately, these are not a great source of protein because they are more carbohydrate than they are protein. If you are going to consume beans and it's going to be a staple, then you want to make sure that they're as small as possible, making lentils your best choice. Just be mindful of this. I'm not saying don't eat them. I'm saying pay attention to the percentages of types of protein that you're choosing. I want to talk a little bit about food combining and how I look at my daily intake of food. I try at every meal to look at my plate and say, okay, what am I eating? Is 80% of what I'm eating coming from the earth? Is 80% coming from fruits and vegetables, and really bringing good nourishment into my body? And the other 20%, is that coming from perhaps animal protein, other sources of protein, or empty calories? And so use the 80-20 rule if you can. And then sometimes during the holidays, it was impossible to have a dish at some places that I found myself at where I could have 80% vegetables, right? Or good high quality food. So look at your day. If you know that you just had a meal that has been rough on you, then your next meal, choose a healthy salad and maybe use some fresh lemon juice and some sea salt and pepper. And try to create that balance and really be mindful. In general, the rule of thumb, 6 vegetables per day, 2 fruits per day, 1 starch and 1 protein. And in terms of food combining, keep your starch and your protein separate. Either eat your starch at lunch or dinner and your protein at the other meal that you didn't. So as a general rule, if you are trying to lose weight or build muscle mass or recover from illness or disease or build bone, these need to be taken into consideration, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it if you're so interested, because the different rules apply for those situations. Because for a temporary time span, we need to bring those goals into focus and make conscious choices that are going to support those goals. And we can do that by choosing the right types of fuel for our body, the right types of food. All right. The other thing I wanted to share is 50 to 60% raw would be best and ideal. Our body likes raw food. Again, in general, lots of things going on in today's world, and we have to be mindful of that. So these rules aren't all encompassing, but general rules. And then too much protein can be really hard on the liver. It can be really hard on the kidneys, and it can create urea buildup in the body. So if you are someone that is insulin resistant, or you have heart disease in your family, or you know someone in your family who's been on dialysis, for example, then you want to be thinking about lessening the burden that protein puts on the body. How can I bodybuild, get enough protein, and also be mindful of eating too much protein? We do it in waves. We pulsate it in. That means for several weeks or a few weeks or 2 weeks, you are eating larger amounts of protein. And then for 2 or 3 weeks, you're taking a break and you're going back to half the protein that you would be consuming during bodybuilding. It is possible, and a diet that fits you and structures the right amount of protein for you is possible. All right, I want to circle back before I close to protein powder. What are you trying to get from your protein shake? You are trying to get high quality nutrition. So we want to be picking clean forms of protein. Grass-fed whey protein is great, but if you are vegetarian or vegan and you're looking for something else, it's going to really depend on your constitution. So pea protein is okay, and rice protein is going to be the necessary thing for people who have lots and lots of allergies and digestive problems. So reach out to me. I can help you with that. But I will say anything that comes in a carton or a can or a bottle that's already mixed should be used in times of a pinch. Should never be used as a staple, because they are not stable. They have pretty much no nutritional value left in them after they've been on the shelf. They are filled with sugar. Even if you don't see sugar in the ingredients or added sugar, it turns to sugar. It becomes carbohydrate-like in our body. So be very careful of those. And again, I'm speaking in generalities. All right, I think I answered all the questions. I hope that you've enjoyed our time together. It was a long one. Thanks for sticking in there with me to become more educated on how to live a self-empowered life.